Hi everyone, this is Katie from Katie Loves Classic Books, and I'm here today with my March wrap-up. So, I don't know if you have recently watched my February wrap-up or not, but I'm doing them at the same day because I'm a little bit behind. So at least this March wrap-up isn't too late though. I only read 2 books in March, which is really weird for me. It was just a strange month, I guess. Like, in some respects, like, I was really busy, like, with work, like, more so than I had been, I guess, and just, like, preoccupied with, like, stuff in my personal life, maybe, too, so that I, like, didn't feel like reading as much. And also, there was just, like, this one week that I think I didn't read at all, I think, which is really strange for me because, I don't know, I just, like, couldn't concentrate, and I was just, like, too spaced out to read, which is just rather normal for me. So March was just kind of weird. But I did read 2 books. They were both really good. One was really long, so maybe if it hadn't been as long, I would have read like 3 books or something. But I'm excited to tell you about them. So if you've watched my February wrap up, you'll know that for most of the month I was doing this thing where I picked up books by authors that I know I really like and just feel like I need to read more of their books and like not put them off. And so the first book I read in March was continuing on that theme, and then I stopped doing that. And so that writer is Haruki Murakami. I think this is the 5th book of his I've read. Let's see. So I read 1Q84, which is my absolute favorite book by him, a favorite book of all time. Kafka on the Shore, which is really great too. I mean, all his books are great. And then After Dark, and then The Wind Up Bird Chronicle, and now Sputnik Sweetheart. And this is published in 1999, and I gave this 4 to 5 stars on Goodreads. And so Haruki Murakami is a contemporary Japanese writer, and I don't think he only writes magical realism, but that's kind of his thing, and all the books I've read of his are magical realism. I haven't read any of his novels that don't fall into that category. So, Sputnik Sweetheart follows a narrator named Kay. We don't really know him as anything else. And he is in love with his friend named Sumire. But Sumire is in love with an older woman named Miu. And the magical realism element kicks off when Miu and Sumire are on a Greek island together, but then Sumire, I don't know, disappears, and then Kay travels to Greece to help find her, I guess. So, at first I thought this wasn't going to be a magical realism novel because the first half of it seemed pretty normal, but then, like I said, when Kay travels to Greece, then the magical realism element really kicks off, which I really enjoyed. I love Murakami's kind of magical realism. This dreamlike, bizarre, unexplainable magical realism is just really awesome. And so what this novel explores a lot is loneliness versus connection. And that is a theme that crops up in probably all of the Murakami novels that I've read so far. But I liked the imagery it took on in this one. The Sputnik satellites were images that he kept coming back to over and over again, as if like humans are kind of like these lonely satellites orbiting their lonely orbits, but like longing for connection. And so that was pretty interesting. And yeah, and this book obviously is also about this love triangle and unrequited love, but also maybe more so unrequited desire. The magical realism element really had to do with like this parallel world or a second self, and it was kind of like in one world or oneself was rather lonely and solitary, but then the other world is one where you get your desires met or feel the desire that you'd like to. One of the characters, she feels like she's unable to feel desire, so in that parallel world, she feels the desire that she wishes she could feel. So that was pretty interesting, and I liked that magical realism element. I did like the setting of this. This was the first Murakami novel that I've read that wasn't like set mostly in Japan, or at least like with like a setting more in like Europe with the Mediterranean Greek setting. But I did really like the setting of Greece. That was really cool. Yeah, so I really liked the magical realism in this. It was really good. And I did like the writing, but I think there was something about the writing style or something of this novel that just seemed a little bit different than his other novels. And for some reason that meant I didn't love it. Like, this was a really good book. It just didn't impact me as much as his other books did. And so that's why I think that this is the first time I've given one of his books 4 out of 5 stars. But that doesn't mean I didn't like it, because I still really did like it. It was really good. Yeah. There was an interesting, I guess not a discussion. So one of the characters, Sunir, she writes up this document at one point because she's a writer that Kay reads. And it's all about understanding and how when we try to understand things as humans, sometimes we get confused. How like what we understand about a situation is always married to what we don't understand about the same situation. And how that kind of leads to confusion. But then how in dreams there's kind of a dream logic, and it's like all these bizarre things happen, but you just kind of accept and go with it. I thought that was a really interesting concept in general, but I feel like that's kind of how to read a Murakami novel, is to just kind of go with it and accept its dream logic, because that's really what they seem like. They seem like dreams, and it's like when you're reading them, you just go with them, and all these bizarre things happen, but they just seem normal in the moment, and you're just kind of going with them like, oh, okay, huh. And then you take a step back from it, and then you're like, what was that? Like, what is that even about? And then it seems kind of confusing. But so while certain things like themes emerge and whatnot at the end, there's always that which is unexplainable, that doesn't really make sense, but that's part of what makes his writing interesting to me. And so not everybody likes that sort of thing, but I do really like that sort of thing. And I do think this was a great book. I just think some of his other books are better, but I really recommend him as a writer. And like I said, 1Q84 is my favorite book of his. I do really recommend that. Kafka on the Shore is really good too if you're okay with like really weird magical realism. If you want less magical realism, After Dark is a great one to start with too. So anyway, the second book that I read in March, and that took me most of the month, was The Count of Monte Cristo by the French author Alexandre Dumas, and this was published in the years between 1844 and 1846. And I gave this 5 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. So this was a classic that so many people were telling me I should read. And I was just so hesitant to do so. It just like did not seem like my cup of tea at all. And it's really long, it's like over 1,000 pages. And I just didn't think I had interest in reading it. But I'm so glad I did, because this was a fantastic classic, really amazing. So, it follows a young man, or at least in the beginning of the novel, he's young, named Edmond Dantes, and he's a sailor. And he's returning home after a long voyage, and things seem to be going well for him. He's about to be appointed captain of the ship he was working on, and he's about to marry his true love, Mercedes. But there are those that are jealous of him simply because he has the good fortune and everything going for him. So they plot against him, and he becomes wrongfully imprisoned for 14 years, which is so rough. But then when he manages to get out of prison, he finds a vast treasure, and he becomes very wealthy, and he seeks revenge on those who did him wrong. So, I think why I didn't want to read this book is because it sounds like it was going to spend a lot of time on him being imprisoned, and then the revenge part sounded like mindless action with like endless sword fights to the death or something. And I was like, that's not something I'm interested in. But I was wrong. Of course, part of this was spent in prison. It had to be, but really not that long at all. So I was happy by that. And then revenge was not what I thought it was going to be in the slightest. There are not endless sword fights to the death. And the Count, Edmund becomes known as the Count of Monte Cristo, really doesn't lay a hand on anybody, to be honest. So, what this is a fantastic story, not only just about Edmund, but of all these people connected to him. And this has such a fabulous cast of characters, and just all the relationships and just everything that they're involved in, and just how it unravels is so good. So basically we follow the characters that Edmund knew before he got imprisoned, both the good people and the bad people and their offspring, and that becomes the cast of characters that we follow. But you don't realize that from the offset. That is so good. And so Edmund has come back now as the Count of Monte Cristo, and he is fabulously wealthy. I mean, ridiculously wealthy. It's kind of awesome how wealthy he is. And he lives as if he's like from the Arabian Nights or something like that. And he basically plays the part of karma. He does seek revenge and justice on those who did him wrong, and he sets in motion plots that are the undoing of all these people, but yet also he seeks to give help and aid to those that are good and those who wished him well and did good things to him. And so that's cool as well. So this is about justice and revenge, but yet ultimately also about forgiveness a little bit. It's about jealousy and just what that does to people, and just how cruel that is, really, to be jealous of another man's good fortune, and just how bad people get there. I don't know what's kind of coming for them at the end, and that good people are rewarded. There is like a message. The Count tells his young friend Morel at the end that those who are good need only wait and hope, and they will have good things come to them. That's sort of like part of the little moral lesson of the novel, and something the Count learns. And also, he also tells them that without great suffering, you cannot know great happiness, and that's kind of another lesson the Count got out of it and passes on to his young friend Morel at the end, and part of the message of the novel, which is cool. So, the setting was really wonderful in this. It is mostly set in France, mostly in Paris, and the 19th century world of Paris really came to life, as well as the history of this time period. It dealt a lot with Napoleon and kind of his exile, and then when he came back for like, what was it, like the 100 Days or something. That kind of part of history is tied into this novel, as what Dantes is accused of is being a Bonapartist, and so that's tied into it. There were scenes set elsewhere, particularly in Rome. I loved the part set in Rome, dealing with these like bandits and with carnival or carnival, however you say it, that really just came to life, that whole celebration, and just the atmosphere of that, and the visuals really came to life with that. And so the setting was really wonderful. And just the characters, like I said, I love this cast of characters and how it all unfolded. So cool, so compelling, wonderful, wonderful characters. Edmund, who turns into the Count, is a fantastic character, and when he's young, he's just so sweet, and you can't help but really feel compassion for him and to like him. And then the Count he turns into is so fascinating and such a character, and he's just endlessly compelling to read about. There was a love story between young people, a girl named Valentine and a guy named Morel, and that was a wonderful element to the story. I loved their love story. Valentine's grandfather, Noirtier, was a wonderful character. He was paralyzed and could only communicate by blinking his eyes, and I thought that was really fascinating, and there was like a whole system they had down to like communicate with him, and I thought that was really cool, and he was just like a really endearing character. There are pretty much 3 villains. Is that true? No, kind of 4. Yeah, 4 villains that are kind of, who were the ones that were jealous of Dante's and got him imprisoned. And so we do follow them and all of their offspring. But there's one villain that kind of stood out. The other ones kind of were just similar. But one really stood out and was rather interesting to read about. I thought his family was the most interesting. He was the most interesting. That's a V for it. And I didn't really feel for him, but yet he did seem to have the most complex story and the most humanity. Like, you just don't really see the other ones as like very human, or you just don't really care about them at all. In terms of the Count's love story, I don't know what I really thought of the ending. It's not what I expected, but yet I kind of see how that makes sense and is realistic and whatnot. So I won't spoil it, but it was like, it's still a somewhat satisfying ending in terms of his own love story. Just not really what I expected. I don't know how satisfying, but I was cool with it. Anyways, so this was just a wonderful classic, and it was very compelling to read. And yeah, just some of the best characters and best storytelling, and I absolutely loved that. And I really do want to read more of Alexandre Dumas, because I could see myself becoming a big fan, and I'm so glad everyone kept telling me to read this, or I probably would not have, or maybe not for a really long time. And so I really encourage everybody, if you are hesitant to pick this up, like, please pick it up. There's so much to it, and it's not what you think. And it's a fantastic classic. Yeah, so those were my 2 books I read in March. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you've read either of these 2 books or want to recommend something to me, please comment below. I will link my Tumblr and Goodreads below as well, where I post written reviews that I write for every book I read, as well as I post quotes on Tumblr as well, if you're interested in those. And I also link my Patreon account, and I always appreciate it when I'm supported on there. It just really helps me out, and it's just a really kind gesture as well. And I have some patrons at the moment, so thank you so much to all of you. Very appreciated, and I shall see you for my April wrap-up next month, and hopefully it will be on time. So have a great month, and have a wonderful time reading. Hopefully you all read some really great books. All right, bye.